If you're interested in more details about what is going on in the React application, React has a performance tools add-on that is really helpful. React add-ons perf. So let's go ahead and bring this to our application. Yarn add --dev React perf add-ons. And we'll go ahead and import this performance add-ons in our code. I am going to import it in the app component in here. So I'm only adding the React add-ons perf as a development dependency because we're just going to use it in development mode. And we can use this perf add-ons in many ways, but the simplest really would be to just place it on the window. So window.perf equal perf, and then interact with this perf tool within the Chrome console. But I think that's actually going to break our server in here because we are doing server render and window is not defined on server render. So actually, if you want to use window in a server rendered component, you have to put it behind an if statement. And that if statement basically is if type of window does not equal undefined, then you can use this statement. Otherwise, you will do nothing. And I think this will make the app happy. And now if we re-render the application, we would have the performance object on the window. So this is actually the full API of the performance object. We can do start and stop, and we can print DOM, exclusive, inclusive, operations, and wasted. So let's go ahead and test those. We do perf.start. That's a function. This would start the measurements, and our application is taking every second really, and it's re-rendering the whole tree every second. So I know that we have some wasteful operation going on. So let's go ahead and stop that. Just do stop, and then take a look at the wasteful operation with perf.print wasted, just like that. And you would see how we have so many wasted operations in this application. So ideally, this print wasted function should output nothing, because otherwise you have a lot of renders that are totally unnecessary. So we can solve this problem now that we can measure it. However, before we solve this problem, we should see a consistent measurement. We should have a way of always seeing consistent numbers here. So to do that, I am going to invoke perf.start and perf.stop in particular points in the application. So how about in component did mount, we do a perf start. Now, sometimes when you do that directly, you get this error that the mark did not exist. And this is a specific issue with the perf component. There are some restrictions on using it, but one thing we can do is to put the perf start code in a set immediate call to be invoked in the next tick of the event loop. So set immediate function, and then perf start inside that function, and that would be okay. And I'll go ahead and set timeout and do that after exactly 5 seconds, and perf stop in here. So after 5 seconds, we'll stop the performance and we'll go ahead and perf.print wasted. So hopefully doing this would give me consistent numbers of the wasted operations. Let's go ahead and test. So after 5 seconds, I should see the wasted table, and I see 25 article list components were rendered wastefully, article container as well. The app component itself was wastefully re-rendered 5 times, and so is the article timestamp and search component. Okay, so let's retest this and make sure we're getting the exact same numbers after 5 seconds. And we are. So this is consistent measures. Now I know if I start doing some changes, if these numbers go down or go up, I know that my changes are causing that, and not the fact that we are measuring different durations or different cases in the app component. We're always getting 25 in article list, 25 in article container, and so on. So there are many reasons why a React component gets wastefully re-rendered. And we can avoid most of these reasons by using pure components. So let's take a look at these components. So the container components are all wastefully re-rendering because we're basically force updating those every time the state of the store changes, which is every second. So that makes sense. I'll come back to those later. But let's see why this article list component is being re-rendered. That does not make any sense, right? Let's take a look at article list. And article list here is a function component. And here's the thing. The article list component does not really need to re-render at all, because it doesn't change. What changes is the global time. So the article list component and all the articles really don't need to re-render here. But the thing is, function components always re-render because React doesn't really optimize function components. So if you're not using a higher order component that optimizes the performance of a function component, then using a function component is actually a bad idea because it will always re-render no matter what. Now, we have two solutions here. One solution is to call the article list component directly instead of calling it as a component because it's a function, right? So instead of doing that, I can call this function directly. I could do something like article list, call it with an object that pass in the articles, just like that. And that actually is going to work and make us avoid the unnecessary render in the article list component. So let me test that. You'll see the application is still rendering correctly, and the wasteful table doesn't have my article list container. So that's one way of avoiding an unnecessary render in React application. However, by doing so, we really lose some value of this component. If we take a look at the React DevTools at this point, we're not going to see the article list component. We're just going to see a div here. There's no article list component surrounding the article container. But it is better in terms of performance. However, how can we keep the article list component as an actual component in our tree, but not wastefully re-rendering its content when it doesn't need to? The answer is, don't use a function component. Use a pure component instead. So I'm going to take the exact same return, and instead of using an article list function component, I'm going to use a React pure component, article list, and return exactly what we had before. And instead of props.article, it's now this.props.article. So the exact same thing, but instead of a function component, we're now using a pure component. And here's the thing, that will get rid of the wasteful re-render in the article list component. Let's test. So the application is still re-rendering through a component, and I don't have the article list component reported as a wasteful render thanks to the pure component. Because if your props and state are exactly the same, we don't need to re-render. This is an optimization that we can do. So I've probably said this a few times already, but here is the advice. Always use pure component unless you have a reason not to. And the other advice here, avoid function components unless you are using higher order components that optimize the performance of function components. For example, if you're using React Redux, then React Redux is going to optimize the performance of any wrapped component. So using function components in that case is okay. But if you're not using React Redux, you're much better off using pure components than using function components. The React team is working on optimizing function components, but until they do, avoid them. So we still have 5 instances of wasteful renders here. Let's see if pure components is going to solve that. I'm going to go ahead and change the article component into a pure component instead of a function component and see if that's going to help me. And let's take a look. So I've previously had 25 wasteful re-render in the article component, and I think those are going to go away with just using pure components. And they did. Let's take a look at the other components. So we still have 4 instances of wasteful re-render. 3 of them are actually for the container components, which are all provided through the store provider. And there's also the app component itself, which is being wastefully re-rendered 5 times. So sometimes using a pure component is not going to be enough. For example, if we changed the app component into a pure component, that's actually not going to help us. And I'll go ahead and test that. Refresh, and you'll see that the app component is still being wastefully re-rendered 5 times. So using a pure component is recommended, but just know that sometimes it's not enough. You have to dig deeper to know why the component is being re-rendered.